Welcome to Historically Speaking. I'm your host, Michael Dwyer, and we are going to continue on our tour of American artists. This time we will be looking at 6 American masters, namely Frederic Remington, George Wesley Bellows, Georgia O'Keeffe, Thomas Hart Benton, Grant Wood, and Edward Hopper. And as you can see from the preview here, we will be spending a little bit of time with one of the most iconic American paintings of the 20th century, American Gothic. We'll start with Frederic Remington. Frederic Remington, who was born in Canton, New York in the first year of the Civil War. His father was a cavalry officer, and because of his father's military experience, Frederic Remington grew up around horses, loved horses, and really is the painter and the sculptor of the Wild West. And as you can see from the photographic images here, he was a very large man, weighing in at over 300 pounds. And this, sadly, was a factor in his own death at the age of 48. He died right after Christmas of 1909, age 48, from an appendectomy that went wrong. He died from peritonitis, and part of the problem was with anesthesia, which wasn't working terribly well because of his weight. And we know that he is most famous for paintings of the Wild West as he imagined it. This image, which is called the Apache, conforms to the stereotype that there were Native Americans who would have attacked stagecoaches. And here we know from the facts of history that there was probably only 1 out of every 400 stagecoach crossings that would have been attacked by a Native American. This one, they look like Rough Riders from the Spanish-American War. This one is called Cavalry Charge on the Southern Plains. And you can see here that he is emphasizing the wild nature of these cowboys, almost with their guns in the air. This is a very introspective painting. It's called The Outlier. And I think it is a very respectful painting of this Native American, and I have often wondered, is that the sun setting on his way of life ending, or is it a sun rising? To me, I think it is more of a setting sun. An example, famous example of Frederic Remington as a sculptor, and this is called the Bronco Buster. And there's actually one of these in the anteroom to the Oval Office in the White House. This is called Coming Through the Rye, and it's a play on words here because the 4 cowboys here are marching through a rye field, and they are drunk on rye whiskey. And the interesting thing about the way that Frederic Remington modeled this is that you have 1 horse with the 4 legs, 3 legs, and then one that is totally with the hooves in the air, as you can see on the left-hand side. This is a good example of a literary philosophical movement of the early years of the 20th century. This is called The Last March, and it exemplifies naturalism, which is an extreme form of realism. So if you think of some of Jack London's stories, Call of the Wild to Build a Fire, this poor horse here who is dying is being surrounded by marauding wolves. On to George Wesley Bellows. George Bellows is someone who took art in a different direction, and he would be known for very gritty portrayals of urban life. And this is something that really sets an artist like him apart from his European contemporaries. This is New York City, 1911. And if we look carefully at this painting, in the foreground, we have the remnants of old New York. This is probably right at the tip of Manhattan, where you can see that some of the conveyances were still horse-drawn. But as you look into the receding background, this is New York with the taller skyscrapers being depicted here. And one of the things that made skyscrapers possible is the use of the elevator that allowed people to get up past what would have been possible as walk-ups. In a similar vein here, this one is called the Men of the Docks in New York City. And once again here you have men who are going to be working on the docks, again a horse-drawn conveyance, and in the background we can see what is probably a huge cruise ship. So this is very much a celebration of ordinary people, scenes of urban life. This one is called Cliff Dwellers, and this is the tenements of the Lower East Side in Boston and in New York City. And by Bellows calling this Cliff Dwellers, he's almost reminiscing about the Pueblo dwellers here. But this is not a negative depiction of the vitality of life in the inner city, because these people kind of look quite happy. One woman at the base of the steps here looks a little bit inebriated. And this image is the archetypal boxing picture. This is called Dempsey versus Firpo, and again you can see that this is a celebration of raw masculinity, and that he would take this further in a similar painting here, much rougher in its composition, and this is called Stag Fight at Sharkey's. A very interesting painting is this one, somewhat atypical of George Bellows, but he was very much consumed by important social issues. And this is called The Murder of Edith Cavell. And in 1915, Edith Cavell, who was a British nurse taking care of soldiers in Belgium, was arrested and accused of being a spy. And despite international protest, she was taken out and shot. And in the way that Bellows is choosing to represent this story, it looks like one of the early Christians descending into the dungeon. Georgia O'Keeffe needs very little introduction, remarkably long life. She had a transformative experience when she discovered the American Southwest. I've had the opportunity to visit the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum in Santa Fe, and she was prolific throughout her life, painting well into her 90s. And in the two photographs that you see here is a somewhat younger woman. Her face was immortalized by her husband, Alfred Stieglitz, who was 23 years her senior. And Alfred Stieglitz was one of the most important photographers of the American photographers in the early 20th century. And Georgia O'Keeffe's face became as famous as her artwork itself. To show you how her style changed over time, this is when she was much more abstract, right around the time of World War I. And this idealized image is the Radiator Building in New York City, the Radiator Building by night. Her style, of course, changed, and she became known for her very enigmatic portrayal, close-up portraits of flowers. And one of her most famous pictures in this genre is called Black Iris. This is another formula that she used quite substantially, and this one is called this is called Summer Ram's Head. So you can see the ram's head antlers and the flower. And again here we have another one of her ram's heads here. And several years ago, her red poppies were immortalized in a United States postage stamp when stamps were 32 cents. So I guess it's longer ago than I realized. And I kept going to the post office and buying sheets and sheets of these. And when I was running out, I mentioned to the last person to whom I was writing, "You are going to be the lucky recipient of my last Georgia O'Keeffe stamp." Another one of her flower paintings. And this next one here is called Bones. It's called Red Hill in Bones. And with the red hills, it's a little bit disturbing because, of course, you have the kind of surreal magnification of the bones here. And the hills, the red hills, look almost like an animal laying down. Thomas Hart Benton, named after his famous great-grand-uncle, who was an important Missouri legislator in the 19th century. And he would be the man who would epitomize his own state of Missouri, and he would be famous for many murals. And at left we have a portrait of him and his wife, painted around 1929. He continued to paint throughout his long life. You can see him is an older, rather crotchety-looking artist, as you can see in the upper right-hand corner, and then a photograph of him in the middle 1930s. One of his famous commissions was painting the Missouri State House, a round room in which he painted a panoramic mural called The Social History of the State of Missouri. And right over the doorway, you can see a scene from Huckleberry Finn of Huck and Jim. And one of the things throughout his paintings that he certainly protested against was racial violence. So here we have Jim as a very rugged-looking man with Huck here, but it doesn't conform to some of the rather demeaning racial stereotypes that were prevalent at this time. And in his murals, they can be a little bit difficult to follow because they sometimes capture in one frame various aspects. So you have Huck and Jim not only on the raft, kind of in the middle of the painting, but also the close-up of them with an exchange of how Jim is presenting Huck with a fish that he just caught. This one is called The Ballad of the Jealous Lover. And here, as we look in a rather sinuous way as this story is being told, in the upper left-hand portion of the painting, we have this jealous man who is about to murder his wife because of his belief that she was carrying on an adulterous affair. And if we follow in the rather sinuous, winding way that Benton presents this, we can see that the incident was transformed into a ballad that is being played by the man on the harmonica and the other with the fiddle. This is another one of his multitask murals. This one is called The History of Indiana. And in this, its nickname is Parks, Circus, and Clan. And one of the things that he is protesting here, you could look at the top of the painting, and you have bombs dropping, and this is an allusion to when the Luftwaffe, at Franco's behest, dropped bombs on the Spanish market town of Guernica in 1937. And you can also see, just about in the center of the painting, a man wearing a KKK robe. And when I was presenting these and studying these images with my students, one of the things that makes Thomas Hart Benton a unique artist is his characters are almost, for want of a better word, Gumby-like. And this is a very poignant painting here, and it's called The Tobacco Sorters. So you have the very earthy farmer here who's probably worn down by work, and the little girl. This one, you can see that there is a disaster that is about to happen here, and this is called the wreck of the old 97 train. And here you have a collision between the horse-drawn carriage with the woman being catapulted out and the unfortunate collision that will happen with the train. Grant Wood. Grant Wood, as you can see here in a self-portrait in the early 1930s. So Grant Wood is to his native Iowa as Thomas Hart Benton was to his Missouri. And you can see that it was a very honest self-portrait. In his younger days, Grant Wood studied in Europe, and he was very much influenced by the full frontal German portraits of the early 16th century. And here he is wearing his characteristic overalls in a typical Grant Wood scene in the background. American Gothic, certainly one of the most recognizable American paintings. The name comes from the Gothic window that you can see in the cottage. And this has been widely epitomized as kind of a dissonant holding on to old-fashioned values as time is changing. And what is often misunderstood about this painting is that it's not a husband and wife, but rather it is the farmer and his daughter. And the models for this painting, as you can see in the small photograph at right, is his sister Nan and then his dentist. So there you have it. This painting at the Art Institute of Chicago, and I've seen it in situ, and people gather around this painting just like they do for the Mona Lisa at the Louvre. This is a typical Iowa landscape. This is Sioux Falls, Iowa, which I believe is Herbert Hoover's birthplace. And I would often say to my student, you can often tell a Grant Wood landscape by the lollipop trees. And when you think of how he executes the landscape here, this is something that you can see in The Wizard of Oz, between the way that you have kind of an idealized landscape here. And again, it's a very bucolic image that as America is modernizing, you still have an emphasis on simple village farm life. Love this painting. We've talked about this before. This is called Parson Weems' Fable. And it's a very tongue-in-cheek poking fun at Parson Weems, who wrote a very hagiographic biography of George Washington after his death. And he is the one who gave us the story, Pa, I Cannot Tell a Lie, when George Washington cuts down the cherry tree. And to show you how humorous this is, we have the Gilbert Stuart head, which is on our dollar bill, on the little George Washington here. And the way that paintings speak to one another, you can see in the lower right-hand corner Charles Willson Peale's self-portrait that we've looked at earlier when he is showing off the artist in his museum. Charles Willson Peale is showing us the treasures of his museum, which were on the second floor of Independence Hall in Philadelphia. And with an apology to all my dear friends who were in the DAR, he is he is very much poking fun at the DAR ladies here, who look rather frightful. You can see the lady who is holding the teacup here with almost claw-like hands, and in the background you can see a print of Emanuel Leutz's Washington crossing the Delaware. So certainly a caricature of DAR ladies. It's not one that would be a very good recruitment poster. Paul Revere's Ride. And this is a wonderful, lighthearted depiction of Old North Church. You can see Paul Revere on his horse riding off at left. The houses, of course, are unrealistically lit because there wouldn't have been that strong a light in 1775. So he's really reducing the whole story of Paul Revere to a legend. And this is something that reminds me when I, as a child, and my parents would take me to Jordan Marsh department store, they would have the Christmas Village display. And this painting has that kind of quality of the Christmas Village and the little houses that you would set up, and they would be lit from the inside. Grant Wood's life was tragically cut short the day before his 51st birthday, when he died of pancreatic cancer. And we'll end with Edward Hopper. Edward Hopper, who was born in Nyack, New York. Here is one of his self-portraits, and then a photograph of him in the mid-1930s. And he is best known for creating these rather eerie images of the loneliness and the isolation of modern life. So here you have a hotel lobby painted in 1925. Strangely, there is no person behind the desk to greet the person, and the people here really aren't connected to one another. So the man may or may not be talking to the seated lady. The lady who is on our right doesn't seem to be in active communication with either of these people. This one, very eerie and spooky. This one is called 7 o'clock in the morning. And here you have a very precisionist depiction of a storefront with no one there. And the forest that you see in the background looks kind of dark and menacing. And this is very much what you would see in other Hopper paintings that we're going to be looking at. There's something frosty and a bit disturbing about them. Now, something a little different here. This is when Edward Hopper spent several years in the mid-1930s touring Vermont. And this is, of course, a maple sugar shack. And this is a painting that when Middlebury College presented a Hopper exhibition in 2013, I took my students. And as one entered the exhibition, they had a life-size kiosk of Edward Hopper. He was 6'5". So I asked one of the museum staff, could I please have the Edward Hopper kiosk? Oh no, we cannot give anything away from our exhibition. I said, what are you going to do when the exhibition is over? Throw it out. I never did get it. This one, again, a very creepy kind of painting. It's called The House by the Railroad. Kind of looks like the the Bates Mansion from Psycho, certainly an Italianate house here. But what gives the painting some tension, you have obviously an Italianate house probably from the 1860s, but the railroad line just seems to cut it off. And again, it's eerie, it's still, and makes us just wonder. Now, next to American Gothic, the other painting that has a cult following at the Art Institute of Chicago is Nighthawks. And again, this was painted during World War II, so you have obviously a brightly lit all-night diner, but in the diner you have people that really aren't connected to one another. And again, this fits the overall theme of Hopper in the disconnectedness and the isolation that he perceived of modern American life. And the other thing that's very Hopper-esque here is that in the background you have vacant windows, so you just wonder, is anyone living there? Is the building vacant? And again, there are all sorts of reasons why that this painting is one that is one of the most reproduced, one of the best known paintings, because it probably raises more questions than it does answers. And to conclude our study of Hopper, who painted well into his 70s, we have this one that is called Rooms by the Sea. And this is where I think later in his life he is definitely courting surrealism. So here you would not expect to open the door and have the sea right there. And when I have studied this, it makes me think of something that you would probably see on the Twilight Zone. When you have American paintings that are widely known, they are often the subject of satire, and we have a couple here of satires of American Gothic. Here is when Michelle and Barack Obama were in the White House. In this one, one of my students did for me with face-swapping technology, that you have the farmer and his daughter in the Gothic window, but he swapped out the faces. And this is from Mad magazine, certainly very, very irreverent, but you could probably go into any card shop that offers a variety of funny cards, and I'm sure you could find at least one takeoff on American Gothic. And again here, there are many funny takeoffs on the Nighthawks, as you can see here. Here, the Lego version of Nighthawks, and one with some cartoon characters. So here we have our wrapping up of 6 unique American artists who put their own signature style on what they painted, and they drew their inspiration from their own experience here, where they lived, and again, kind of blazing a new chapter in American art in the early years of the 20th century that is different from what was going on in Europe. Thank you for listening, and I'll look forward to our next presentation.